We're going to move on to the front page of the Daily Telegraph, and this is an interesting story. It's one that's been covered by all of the News Corp tabloid newspapers tomorrow. They've obviously done quite a bit of research into this issue, and it, of course, is about what's going on in our schools, in particular the student-teacher ratios that we are seeing in the classrooms across the country. Now, the class ceiling is the headline on the Daily Telegraph. It says, an analysis of every New South Wales primary and secondary school has revealed Catholic schools, despite the fees parents pay, have worse student-teacher ratios than public school counterparts. Now, Parnell, this is a story that I'm sure every parent is going to want to read tomorrow, and I'm sure everyone will be getting online to click on their school and find out how the student-teacher ratios are at the school where their children attend. But what do you think about this fact that this analysis has basically turned up this information that Catholic schools appear to be worse off than public schools when it comes to these student-teacher ratios?
Look, I should declare an interest before talking about this story because we do some work with Catholic schools. And I haven't read this story, but I will make a general comment about this, and that is that class size doesn't always correlate with outcomes. And we've seen that from around the world. Singaporean classes are much larger. And what does affect the outcomes that classes have is the teaching style. So smaller classes have been shown to be effective when the teaching style is adjusted to that. But of course, the other sort of the modes of learning that they use in classrooms and the qualification of the teachers generally have a greater impact on the outcomes for the students than the class sizes themselves, perhaps with the exception of one-on-one tutoring. So I think we've got to look at it from that perspective, and I just be really, really cautious with this kind of research. The other thing that occurred to me, though, of course, on this is that, you know, if it is really bringing out that we need smaller class sizes, and yet other countries which have very good outcomes for students have larger class sizes, is there something else going on with our classes? You know, we're hearing from teachers a lot that more and more they're expected to be raising the children as well as teaching them. And I wonder if that's what would be driving better outcomes as a result of smaller classes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you make. I know that, you know, as a parent, I'm somewhat bewildered sometimes at the school pick-up or the school drop-off at some of the conversations that I see go on between parents and teachers. And it seems that some parents do expect that it's the teacher's job to do everything for their children, you know, including tie their shoelaces and make their lunch. So, Campbell, have we got to a point in this country where parents are expecting too much of teachers and not really putting in the hard yards themselves on the home front to make sure that their children are reading, that they're learning how to do maths and these sorts of things?
Oh, look, I think there's a fair bit of anecdotal evidence around, but I think it also depends on the community and the socioeconomic factors come into play as well. I think often you have a situation where parents aren't enough engaged in, and I think you were alluding to this before, with what the follow-up stuff at home. I think it's really important, for example, for parents to read to children when they're very, very young. I think that engenders a lifelong love of reading and books, and that's really good for great study habits. But going back to what Parnell was saying, I think she's making some fantastic points on this. I mean, we had this big campaign about Gonski over the last few years, which was really the Australian Education Union carrying on, saying spend more money, you'll get better outcomes. Well, that ain't true. And, more money does mean lower class sizes, a better ratio, but it won't necessarily lead to better outcomes. I'm really keen to know really more about this story in terms of, how are those Catholic schools with the worst ratio? How are they actually performing? My kids went to Catholic schools here in Brisbane and they were high-performing schools. So we were very happy as parents. So I think that's what really matters at the end of the day. Parent engagement, great teachers, a curriculum that allows teachers to teach properly, and they're supported in the right way. If we look at that, I think we'll do a lot better as a nation in terms of our educational outcomes.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points there, both of you, but I do think that it is a concern that we have seen those education standards in this country really slipping over the past few years compared to other countries. It is a real issue of concern, one no doubt that the federal government will be looking closely at.